What is going on, guys? Welcome, Ryan Moody, Jimmy Smith on Jimmy's YouTube channel, here to talk about UFC 244. Apparently, back on. Now, if you're watching this and you didn't watch Jimmy's breakdown, where I guess, you would watch it. It's so weird to go back and forth between mediums. If you didn't watch Jimmy's breakdown of Maya Askren on YouTube, go back and watch that. And if you still have this undying thirst for Jimmy Smith content, you can go over to our podcast where we just did a breakdown of Maya Askren's fight night. So, Jimmy, it looks like UFC 244 has been saved. I don't know what we owe the MMA gods, but I'm sure it's a hefty sum. But apparently, they are going to have the BMF belt on the line as Diaz and Masvidal fight. Now, it's interesting to me that basically Nate came out, demanded a retraction, demanded an apology. So far, that's kind of come to light, and we would see the fight is back on. Somehow, though, I don't think we've heard the end of this. And I'm also very taken back by how many fighters commented on this and almost have to retract those statements as well.
Man, it's all over the place. And what gets me about this whole thing is the exceptionalism. And what Nate Diaz did was he risked this entire payday, this entire card. I think his reputation with a lot of fans and certainly with the organization on them speedily resolving this. And the issue for me is this may set a precedent where other fighters are going to go, well, I want mine speedily resolved. I want my name cleared. I want my issue taken care of. Is that a bad thing? No. But I think it's one of those things where once you say, we can put this in fast gear and fix this in, I believe it was 30 hours. It's hard to then go, well, we need a 6-month investigation and you're suspended until then and da-da-da-da-da-da, which has been kind of the party line before this. If this guy skipped to the front of the line because it was a big show and you needed him and XYZ, well, then you can do it all the time. You have the capability of doing it. And it's this kind of precedent-setting thing that I hope it greases the wheels for other fighters. But if it doesn't, what is it? It's just another example of the big shot getting over. The big name getting over and the small names can't. So it's going to be so interesting, not just in this case, but how this plays out for future fighters in this exact situation. That's the interesting part to me, is the transparency, the speed, the reaction time of this generally slow-moving organization, this bureaucratic entity, was like greased lightning when it was Nate Diaz in a big fight in New York a week out. Boy, they really got it moving. So the idea that, boy, this takes time and da-da-da-da, I don't know, it's going to be hard to play that card again. That's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, it seems funny that due process got expedited. It seems like favoritism may have factored into this, and I don't mean favoritism to Nate Diaz. I mean, he's earned his respect in the industry as a whole, not just with the UFC, but it's awful convenient when you have this big payday looming, how quickly something could be fixed. And like you said, you almost have to wonder, how much did that factor into this? Because generally speaking, this is something that happens after a fight, not before a fight. So I don't feel like this was a permanent resolution. I feel like there was a temporary exception made and the fight can continue. For all we know, and we don't know a lot, this could have also been in Jorge Masvidal's hands. He could have said, listen, I don't care. Whether he's on it or whether he's not, I'll still fight. I'll do what I have to do, sign what I have to sign. He basically came out and said that anyway. So I think a lot of this also could appear from the outside with not knowing all the context to it. Nate pulled the card on him and said, listen, you can either make this right by me or you can find another main event or find someone else to fight, which you and I both know you don't have. So it's very, very strange because not a lot of people could pull the UFC card on them. Maybe Conor. I don't even think Conor could at this day and age. But it's interesting that Nate seemed to have pulled their card.
Well, partly, and you know, you and I discussed this, and I discussed this on SiriusXM this week when the news broke. There is no other BMF. You kind of made this weird Faustian bargain with this card. We're going to do something out of the box. We're going to do something a little different. The Rock is going to put the belt on. It's the BMF belt. It's these two guys. That's it. If this were a lightweight title fight, which is right now the most stacked division in the UFC, it's maybe the most marquee division in the UFC. It has the most momentum. It has the most juice. If somebody went down in that, you could find a different guy, right? If Tony Ferguson, because it's cursed, gets struck by lightning a week before his showdown with Khabib, Justin Gaethje might do it, right? There are other people that can do it. This situation was so unique in that we, as fans, signed up for Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz, and nothing else was going to do. I looked far and wide this week, looking for anybody in the top 10 at 155, even some fringe 170s. The issue, too, if I may say, is this was a welterweight fight between two lightweights. And we took a bunch of crap when we talked about this, by the way, on YouTube. And people, it's a welterweight fight. Yes, but they're not welterweights, okay? So anyone you would have to step in to take his place would have to be basically a lightweight. A welterweight's not going to make weight in 6 days, okay? But a small lightweight might. So you had them kind of over a barrel. It has to be a lightweight. They have to not be in the title hunt because they don't want to take a step back because it's too dangerous of a fight. They have to qualify as a BMF, whatever that means, to the fans. It wasn't going to – nothing was going to fly except Nate Diaz. So Nate Diaz had an almost unprecedented amount of power. I've seen champions, marquee Wheaties box champions, who didn't have this kind of power before a big fight. Because Dana would say, all right, I'll pull you out, throw in somebody else, make an interim belt. Okay, if you don't want to defend your title. He's pulled that card before. But there is no other BMF, and Nate knew it. He was almost – this is almost like just everything had to line up for this to work. And Nate pulled the card right at the one time they absolutely needed him. There was no solid replacement. That's why I thought this fight was going to happen. Look, there just aren't any other options other than make this work, and they did. So Nate may have, because of this, leveraged the relationship between fighters and USADA forever. We'll have to see, but he could have done that.
It's going to be interesting as well because, you know, we got it tied. I mean, they basically came out and said, you know, SARMs was what was being linked to this. Now, if you're not familiar with SARMs, it's similar to a test booster. It's really came in favor the past couple years. Pro hormones used to be a big thing, but their side effects just became too much, and SARMs came online, and basically a lot of people have transitioned over to them. None of this is safe. I mean, SARMs, no matter what form you look at, is really only been tested on, you know, lab mice and monkeys. There's no real human testing to this. But essentially, if you don't know a lot, a quick breakdown, SARMs is selective androgenic receptive modulators. They basically tell your androgen receptors to express, build muscle, recover, synthesize protein. The interesting thing is you pretty much find this in a stack form. So it's done pills, it's done in droppers, generally very small doses. Sometimes you go, 5 days off, 2 days on. It's not something that just shows up in a vitamin packet GNC, because it's often what you're going to take is derived from what your goals are. So I would have to think if a MMA fighter was taking this, they're not taking it just to bulk. They don't want bulk muscle. They want functional muscle. They want not a recomposition of their body, but strength gains, endurance gains. So I would think that you're probably going to be taking something like Rad 140, one of the most popular SARMs out there. So I would think, if anything, it's going to be interesting to see what it comes back to and how they pulled this. Was it actually derived from, a blood test where they saw something off in a blood cell count that made them question? Was it something that came out in a urine test where something came out that made them question? But the interesting argument is it's an expensive, it's not a top tier drug. It's not a designer steroid by any stretch, but it's more expensive than vitamin B, vitamin C. So it would be awkward if any supplement company just happened to put that into their product, not only because of the cost, but imagine the liabilities. I mean, there are people that have side effects, sleeplessness, hunger issues, things that generally wouldn't have you buying a product again. So it's not something that I think just randomly shows up in an over-the-counter product. And if it does, there's someone that's going to pay heavily for this. So I don't, when I talked about earlier, think we've heard the end of this. This didn't just come out of nowhere. There was a tainted test. There was a bad test. Someone has messed up, and it's gotten out. And it nearly cost the UFC a main event. So to think that there's not going to be concrete answers and investigations, I think that's probably just shallow thinking. We're going to know. And by the time we find out, unfortunately, as you said, that may be 6 months down the road.
The interesting thing here, just in general, is, and we got into this with John Jones and, the whole picogram thing. Why are we testing for amounts that don't matter? Because so far, everything I'm reading is the amounts that they found in Nate Diaz are so small, they don't help you. Someone who was using this for a benefit would have a lot more in their system. The amounts they found are so small, they aren't helpful, and they were never helpful. So why do they test for amounts that are that small? That's one thing. Picograms, they don't mean anything. Well, then why are you looking for them? You know what I mean? Why not? Okay, if it's under X amount, it's just not considered a valid positive. So they come out and they find this stuff and then go, well, it doesn't matter, but we still found it. Well, then why is it an issue? Why are you looking for amounts that are so small they're not useful? So that's another thing too, is people are like, why are these tests picking up everything? It's like a metal detector that's so sensitive, it picks up your fillings in your teeth and they just wave you through. Well, then why is it set on a setting that's so sensitive? It's almost a similar kind of thing. So that's another thing I think that leaves fans and pundits a little confused. Why are we testing for amounts that are so small that there's no punishment? Well, then why are we testing for that?
Well, I mean, one thing, illegal is illegal. And if I'm going to fight someone, I want to know what they've done and when they've done it. I think with John Jones, we're in a different scenario because with John Jones, we're talking about pulsing, which essentially meant that once you've taken something illegal, it stays in your body for an undetermined amount of time. We're also talking about things, as we just disclosed, these aren't tested. So we don't actually know how they interact with the human body. So while I would say it's probably not realistic to assume that you would take something and then have it pulse in your system for the next 10 years. So to kind of put a different spin on that, theoretically saying, well, I'm going to take a Benadryl today because I cleaned my gutters yesterday and my allergies are acting up. I don't expect that Benadryl to be in my system 2 years from now, just pulsing around. But that's what we learned with John Jones can happen with some of the things that people take. So I think that's where we are. Number one, we're testing at a far different scientific level than we were even capable of. I mean, if you go back and watch some documentaries, if you look at what Lance Armstrong did to cycling, and that's a big part of the reason that testing is where it is. So the levels they're testing for today weren't even dreamed of 15, 20 years ago. So as those, procedures have gotten more fine, unfortunately, you are picking up metabolites that are left in the body from things years past. So it's not as if, they can take settings out. It's just we've gotten to that point where they can test to ranges they generally couldn't have in the past. And again, the reason they're testing is illegal is illegal. I get your point of, metal detectors and walk through this and your fillings set it off. That's fine. But your fillings are legal to have. This isn't. And I think that's where the fine line is. And listen, I think the other side of this is at some point somebody's going to say, look, I don't want to fight somebody that has something illegal in their system, period. I don't care if it's pulsing, if it's a picogram, or, the smallest object you could get in one's bloodstream. They're the one that goes in to put their life on the line. Seriously. I know people joke about that and they don't think it can happen, but we've seen this year in boxing alone. People do die in these sports. And you as a combatant have the right to say, I only want to fight someone that is clean because I'm clean and that's what I deserve.
Yeah, but my whole issue is if we found, I think it was what, 1/10,000th of a dose or something, whatever they found in Nate Diaz. One of the articles I read said it's 1/10,000th of what you would find in someone who's using it to cheat. If it's below a certain level, all right, we found it, but it's not. If it's that small, then it should. We shouldn't even announce it. It shouldn't even be an issue. Now, I know you're going to say, the other fighter wants to know what's in the system. Like you say, illegal is illegal. Well, then 1/10,000th should be enough. You can't have it both ways. You can't announce somebody has taken a performance-adding drug of some kind, and with the same side of your mouth say, but we know they're not cheating. Okay, well then if it's so low that you know they're not cheating, why did this even come out at all? Why did they even call him and say it? There should be some kind of, you can't be arrested for 1/10,000th of a joint. That's not even illegal. A piece of dust from cannabis on your finger can't get you arrested. Doesn't matter. Illegal is illegal. That amount can't get you arrested. It's not possible. One seed in your pocket can't get you arrested. It's a similar kind of thing as these amounts they're testing for are so low that, oh, we know they're not cheating. Well, then why is it even coming out? That contrast, they have to get around somehow. They have to do that. And this Nate Diaz thing helps them get through that. It's a good thing. And I support it fully.
Well, I hope we learn this is a closed-door system, right? You don't want to see this. I don't want this to come out of the public.
Right.
I don't want to question people when I don't have to. When I need to,
Exactly.
by all means, let the fans know.
Yeah.
But in this, like you said, when we're going to go backwards, you can't retract it, right? I mean, it came out, they said it, we know it. You can't go back and say, hey, that didn't happen. The fact that it happened is enough for someone like Nate to say, listen, this damaged my reputation. This damaged my image negatively. And to some, even though the retraction from the UFC that says, hey, you're clean, you're okay, we're going to continue the fight is enough. There's also other people that say, oh, well, hey, here's a guy that's been very outspoken about steroid use. Here's a guy that basically says everybody's on steroids but me. Literally, he said that. So there's a fine line between what is there and what isn't there. And I understand your point exactly, but at the end of the day, that one seed that is never going to be found is a different context than someone who's voluntarily giving, their urine or their blood to be tested. And when there's something there that shouldn't be there, regardless of how much that trace is, it means at some point it was there. Could it have been there in a larger quantity? We don't know. And that's where all the injection of doubt comes from. Because I know that it wouldn't be in my body. You know that it probably wouldn't be in your body. If it got there, I sure would want to know how. But you also have people that kind of make these grandioso claims of, well, like John Jones, if it was there, it's there. And how do we really know that it doesn't help? I mean, I understand your point. Medically, they can say, hey, this doesn't provide a benefit one way or another, but it's still there, right? So there's something to be said for that side of it. It's to me, it's not as cut and dry of, well, the dose is so small, it doesn't matter. It's still there.
We will see how they move going forward because these contrasts, these contradictions, well, it's there, but it's not enough to help. So we know he didn't cheat. Well, this person has this. They're suspended for 6 months until we figure it out. These kinds of contradictions, the stuff we're talking about, whether I'm right or you're right or it's somewhere in the middle, these contradictions have to get ironed out. And hopefully, this Nate Diaz situation expedites that. Because it showed when they're motivated, they really get their stuff together. And they get it together very, very quickly. So what I'm hoping is this expedites the issues that have been plaguing the USADA UFC relationship for a long time.
Let me ask you this to close this out, because I agree with you. There has to be, the gray area has to be removed. But now that this has already started in the court of public opinion, if you will, is it now something that has to finish in the court of public opinion? Do we have to witness, just like we did with their, invent into the UFC? Do we now have to understand, based on all these things that have happened, whether it's moving John Jones's fights or the picogram failures or this most recent situation with Diaz, do we now as fans, as media, have the right to watch this unfold and understand the steps that are taken so we can better understand what has happened, what will happen, and most importantly, how things will be handled in the future?
Yes, because we pay for it just like the fighters pay for it. If we miss out on Masvidal Diaz, that hurts everybody. That hurts fandom. That hurts the fans. That hurts the people of New York. A lot of hotel rooms get canceled. A lot of tickets don't get purchased. It hurts everybody. The people affected have a right to know. It hurts the fighters first. It hurts us second. And I think the fans have a right to know.
I would agree. I now need to see this play out publicly. I wouldn't have had to before if you'd kept it behind closed doors, but
yeah,
in a way, the cat's already out of the bag, and in many ways, the cat seems to be covered in $100 bills, because that's what you're going to be printing, which is money, now that this fight is back on. So with that said, guys, again, if you made it this far, go back, watch Jimmy's post-fight Askren Maya breakdown. Go over if you want, hit our podcast, Our MMA Show, and don't forget, the podcast this week will be up on YouTube. It will be up on Friday. If you want to listen to it earlier, the podcast is the place to go do that, whether that's through iTunes or through our syndicate Podbean. We appreciate you checking this out, and we'll be back very shortly with more commentary through our syndicate Podbean. We appreciate you.